everyone. I'm Jon Evans. Welcome back for another episode of One-on-One. Peter Zampa is everywhere.
Reporting in New York.
In Albany, Georgia. Here in Portland.
Reporting in Chicago.
We're in Philadelphia.
Reporting in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Reporting in Washington. I'm Peter Zampa.
As senior national correspondent for Gray Media, Peter travels the country covering major news stories for WECT and more than 100 other newsrooms. He also does a regular series called Listening to America. Peter's not traveling today, though. He's joining us from New York City, his home base of operations. Peter, welcome to the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast.
It is a pleasure, John. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you joining us. No one has written a book that I know of, Peter, that says how to be a senior national correspondent. So how have you taken this job and kind of molded it to something you want to do every day?
Yeah, it's a good question because it still feels like the job is relatively new. And at the end of the day, it's just a title. But what I would say is that I really kind of stuck my foot in the door right after college with Gray Media in Washington, D.C., and I didn't let them shut it. It's been 10 plus years of me not letting them shut it, and the relationship has just improved. I've seen our amazing station group grow like nothing else you can really compare. When I began, I believe we were at 40 some odd stations, and now, as you mentioned, we're at about 115. So that is quite some growth, and with that growth comes a lot more responsibility. But really, at the end of the day, it's an honor to be able to not just have a couple of stations to talk to and to tell stories through, but this many, really touching every corner of our country. It is an incredible thing to see.
What is a day like for a senior national correspondent? I know you're on the road a ton with Listening to America, but what's a normal, if there is such a thing, as a normal day for Peter Zampa?
It really varies. Sometimes I say I have my day job and my side gig, which is where I get to travel around and meet all of our amazing viewers, and they welcome me into their homes. Our normal day could vary. It depends on where I am. If I'm in Washington, D.C., which I was for 8.5 years, that could mean that I'm on Capitol Hill or at the White House or at the Supreme Court. Here in New York, it can mean that I'm at the United Nations on any given day, down at Wall Street if there's big breaking financial news. A lot of what we've done is court reporting here, whether it be Donald Trump, who was on trial here for a number of months, or Nicolas Maduro, the former president of Venezuela, who was recently extradited here to New York City. And that's really a huge benefit of being in New York. So much is happening here that folks might not think of. They might think of Washington, D.C. when it comes to these big court cases or big diplomatic efforts, but a lot of that is going on right here in New York. And I also get to talk live with a lot of our stations every other night. For a number of hours. We talk about the latest headlines. Maybe I did a story that day that we want to dive deeper into, but it really does run the gamut.
Now, you mentioned that you were with Gray's D.C. Washington Bureau for nearly 9 years. But if I'm not mistaken, you were a one-man band doing that, right? One of those people that shoot their own stuff, edit their own stuff, and write their own stuff, correct?
That is correct.
So how did you balance doing that on a daily basis and reporting alongside network people that have their own videographer, that have oftentimes their own audio person alongside? Was that a tough thing to get used to?
It's a great question because you might think, well, we're at a disadvantage going in without all of those resources behind us. And it can be daunting at times. You kind of laid it out perfectly. If I'm in a scrum and I'm holding my own camera and I'm meant to be asking the questions where you have all these famous network reporters right alongside us who have all the other people to do those things, it can come off as it makes us look a little younger or maybe not as tuned in as the other reporters just because we have to handle all of these other things. And how can you possibly stay on top of it all? But I quickly realized after just a few months that There's a lot of respect that you earn when you're doing that kind of thing because we were those plucky reporters on the ground. And you also see major networks moving toward the one-man band thing, actually. It's not necessarily with full camera equipment, but you're seeing a lot of these reporters actually take out their phones, take those shots, try to get the interview, the answers that they want with their phones now. So we were almost ahead of the times with being the one-man band on Capitol Hill. But another thing we really had going for us was our company. The fact that Gray Media had these newsrooms at WECT or at WOWT in Omaha or in Anchorage, Alaska, Honolulu, Hawaii. We were the voice for those constituents. So these lawmakers really almost gave us preferential treatment from time to time. Not just out of the goodness of their heart, though you might want to think that, but because they're constantly running for re-election. And who is going to vote for them? It's the people who are watching our newscast, not the people who are watching in networks or cable news all the time. They are the ones watching your local news, John, and they want to get on your local news.
Did that make you a better storyteller? Did it make you almost have to be a better storyteller? And you knew what you had because you were right there shooting the video, so you knew what you had in your back pocket when you sat down and started to write and edit, correct?
Exactly. And I don't want to say I'm a control freak or anything like that, but man, does it feel good to have control of the process from start to finish. And I'm big on organization. I got to get my, everything set for the day. I don't want to boast here, but I'm very serious about deadlines. I probably can count on one hand how many I've missed over all these years, just because to me, that's a pass or fail. We need to be on WECT at 5 p.m. If my deadline is 4:30, we're doing it. Whatever I have, we're doing it. So having that control, and yes, for the storytelling element, I know exactly where this element is going to fit with all that sound I just got with that shot I decided to take outside the Capitol, getting down on my hands and knees just to get that, whatever it might, all of these things, exactly like you laid out, what you have in your head, what you can go to the editing booth with to make it all happen.
Now, there had to be a time or two or three where you're trying to get that lawmaker, because we've all tried to do it. We've all walked down a hallway as somebody doesn't want to stop for the scrum or do that. But you had to do that, I imagine, more than once with the camera, with the microphone and everything. Do you have a tale of one of those times when you had to do that and balance everything that you were carrying?
Oof, really putting me on the spot here. I'll say it like I think back to 2016 when I think about kind of the pluckiness of our job in the Benghazi hearings with Hillary Clinton, and being part of all of that madness constantly was a lot to handle. And yes, you have your camera just trying to get a steady shot. And that was really my first sort of welcome to the big leagues moment where this is the story that's going on right now. And you are doing this differently than everyone else. You just got to stick through it, put in the long hours, and just make sure you're getting something out of this, that you're not just there to be part of the history, but that you're also telling about it as well. That was probably one of those, sorry I don't have a better answer for you,
No.
try not to trip and fall, but going through those hallways, there have been many times where we've had to just kind of make it happen.
With 115 different stations, as you talked about earlier, relying on you in Washington, D.C., and on your reporting, how do you decide on which maybe national story to cover that's going to be as interesting, as important to Wilmington as it is to Omaha, to Alaska, to Georgia, and all the other locations where Gray has a station?
Yeah, it really can be a challenge. And sometimes a big national headline, not people in none of those places really care about it, even though we might, just from a news junkie perspective, if you will. But it is a great question, because going to, sort of my, not my side gig, I'll call it, the Listening to America, the really fun, great stories we get to tell on the road, that's always the first goal. I will say, hey, in Fargo, North Dakota, where I was last week, I'm looking for a story that is very local to Fargo, North Dakota, but it's got to have appeal in Wilmington. It's got to have appeal in not Jacksonville. How am I forgetting our stations? It's got to have that broad appeal everywhere.
Yeah.
And not all of them do. Some of them can feel very specific, but that is always my goal is I don't want just one station. I want one station to feel like they can relate the most, maybe, but I don't want it to just be their story because all of our viewers can relate to a lot of this stuff on some level, even if it's not literally in their backyard. But we do want to make that story that this person is telling us in their living room feel like it's someone they know down the street, even if they're thousands of miles away. So it's a good question because that is always the goal.
You know, to news junkies like you and I, it's always been that the enjoyment of putting the story together that you said that people can relate to. In a town like D.C., where so many people can be, let's face it, I'm going to use the word plastic because they have a reason for doing everything almost. Did you feel, was there a specific time when you felt like you didn't have to prove yourself anymore, that you could do this job on a daily basis and you can handle the rigors of Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, and it happened pretty early on, not because I feel like I figured it out. I'm still figuring it out.
No,
Uh, you know,
all of us are in 2026, and I agree with you.
Right. You know, and it's not, I think I came in with a lot of preconceived notions into DC, like I was ready for this and I deserve this. None of that was true. You know, sometimes you have to get rid of the college cockiness, and that hits you pretty quick in a town like DC. But once I realized that we were doing something a lot different than the networks, we weren't always doing the story, the news of the day story, the big headline. We were trying to find those pockets I'm working on a story right now about bison, so this comes to mind. We were keyed in on the National Bison Legacy Act that made it our national mammal because we had those stations in Fargo or Colorado. That's not something people were focused on, if you can believe it or not, on any given day. And that's really what separated us because some of our viewers out there might not know how this works, but we also have affiliate services out there. So CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, they all have people in DC who can cater to our local audiences by doing the national story. But what we do is really localize it. We take it a step further for our stations. And that was always a value add proposition that our DC Bureau founder and that the leaders at Gray knew was going to set us apart. So as far as sort of saying, oh, well, I can handle this, I can do this, it never felt too much like competition, even though maybe it should have. But because we were doing something so unique and valuable for our local stations, if they were happy, that's the only validation I cared about at the end of the day, was getting that note from a news director across the country who says, hey, this really helped out our newscast today. We had something different than everyone else because you went that extra mile or you found that story that is so relevant to our people rather than just the casual bickering on Capitol Hill that we might follow a little bit too much sometimes.
You mentioned listening to America, and frankly, I really think those pieces are pretty cool because I think it takes someone from America and it try to relate them to the rest of the country and what they're going through, whether it be the train crash in Ohio or the Bison Act that you were talking about, or West Virginia and how they want to be known across the country. How did listening to America really kind of develop, and how much do you put into that compared to the trials of Maduro and everything else that you do on a weekly basis?
Yeah, so this listening to America is what keeps me up at night. Literally last night. So as far as what takes up most of my time, we can be reactionary to whatever the day is going to give us, or we can be proactive, and that's a lot of what listening to America demands. It demands me thinking out these stories, figuring out how to be a travel agent so I can make sure I get my 3 stories each week that I travel to these amazing places. How it came about, I believe it was a midterm election was coming up. I want to say 2022 is likely. And we just said, okay, let's think about a number of issues that people are going to be voting on. And let's go figure out a way to hear those real American voices from the voters. What are their concerns when it comes to prescription drugs, when it comes to housing affordability? And then it really spiraled from there. Initially, it was going to be more of an interview format, but then we said, hey, we can really get some video in here. We can really make these things sing. We can let people listen to these voices and also listen to their surrounding environment with beautiful natural sound and see the pictures in their homes and also in their towns. And then we just started looking at every issue really under the sun. And it just kind of became this beast where now every other week you get these awesome stories that I feel so blessed to tell. Because I can't lie. You have a cool job, John, but the fact that my boss has let me travel around the country and go to all these living rooms, it's pretty special.
Yeah, I can imagine being out on a bison farm in Montana or someplace like that, and then next 2 weeks later, being on the train tracks in Ohio where a train derailed a couple of years ago and people are still fighting for justice. The difference in those two things and the creativity that it forces you to come up with has got to be a challenge, each one in their own right. I think it would be one of the coolest jobs ever.
It is. You laid it out perfectly because, and everywhere I go, I get to tell them, well, yeah, today's bison. Tomorrow is OB access in rural communities. And the fact that we have over 1,000 counties that don't have proper obstetrics care across this country, that's a serious issue that can bring up a lot of pain for some people. Also, I went to an independent grocer who's just skating by, and she's also being blamed for high grocery prices right now. So it's kind of those are the three stories I just got back from doing in the Fargo, Minnesota area. And yes, you're right. Your head is always kind of on a swivel. What's next? But how can I also stay in this moment and not think about tomorrow, which is going to be stressful as well? How can I focus on these amazing creatures, these bison that are just right next to me when they probably shouldn't be? It is so special. But again, that's why I wake up at night, because you mentioned the Ohio train derailment. I woke up at 2:30 this morning in a cold sweat thinking, are these people going to feel like I did them justice? And this is something that I constantly think about. I know you probably do too. Every storyteller does. It's frightening to hit submit on these pieces, even though I went over it, my photographer went over it, my bosses went over it. I still worry that not that the viewers are going to get mad at me for this piece, but that the people who let me into their living rooms are going to feel like it was worthwhile for them to do so, to let me in and tell their story and sometimes get very emotional about it. So that's the stuff that I sometimes stay up thinking about.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. People give you oftentimes their trust. On a nightly basis, I have to earn that invitation into their homes every day. And I have to worry about whether what I'm putting together, whether it's this podcast, whether it's the VO I'm writing for 5:30, whether it's that package that I'm doing tomorrow night or whatever it is. And I've never put that on the side burner, that people invite me into their homes, or when this is ready and I put Peter Zampa on my podcast list, they're investing 30 minutes of their very valuable time to listen to this conversation. And if I don't do my best, I'm not going to earn that invitation back. And that's the way I've always looked at it. And it's really comforting to know that you have that same kind of want to, repay their trust with the best you can possibly do.
Yeah, and to be very clear, it is not a burden. It is the ultimate privilege in this job that people keep allowing us to do this. But it doesn't make it any less stressful when we go to finally hit submit and send it out to the 115 stations, or in your case, send it out to all of your viewers who cherish your work. But you want to make sure that that trust you've built up stays there. It can be daunting.
Born and raised in California, if I'm not mistaken, a young Peter Zampa. How did he get introduced to journalism, and how did he decide he wanted to do this for a living?
My parents didn't talk me away from it. And that's probably because they both were journalists as well. That's actually how they met in the California Bay Area. My father eventually went to the dark side. He went to do PR, comms in the corporate world. But my mother stuck it out. And honestly, I don't know if I should credit her, but she was, well, I obviously should. I love my mom. But she would tell these stories about meeting. She was an entertainment reporter in California, and she got to meet Jim Carrey and Johnny Depp and Hunter S. Thompson, and all the stories she would tell. It's like, man, maybe she doesn't get paid the most. I'm a kid. I don't know any of that. All I know is she's telling these stories, and her eyes are lighting up when she tells them. Also, I must admit, I'm a huge sports fan growing up, so that was always the goal initially. But then I went to Boston University, which had a great journalism program. And actually, it was John Buccigross, a great voice from ESPN, who gave a talk He spoke to a group of students at BU when I was there, and he said, "Hey, I love sports. It's very competitive. I can also host my own political talk show. Be well-rounded in what you do. Take that GA assignment job. Take the political job if you can." So initially, my thought was, "Oh, sports or nothing." And then I started looking into politics a little bit. I did some stuff at Boston University, and then I applied for the DC bureau, and the rest is history. Once you get into that kind of world, it's a bit addicting, and you can't really get away from it. And I'm forever grateful.
While you were in Boston, you had internships in some pretty amazing places: Singapore, London, San Francisco. So it's not like you went across the street to WBZ or went down the street to some of the other Boston stations. You decided to go around the world for your internships.
Well, one summer I did do WDHD. It's gone now.
HDH, right? Yeah.
Yes, HDH. It's no longer affiliated. So I did do that. But yes, another thing that was privilege and I viewed it as a massive burden was my father moved our family to Singapore my senior year of high school. Can you imagine that? 17 and a half years in California growing up. You have all these friends that you've lived down the street from. And then my dad says, "Hey, by the way, we're going to Singapore." It turned out to be the most eye-opening, amazing experience I could ever ask for, and I would not do it over again for anything. But that really, my father's move sort of sparked something in me that has always kind of paid him back, because now I've been gone from California for quite a while because he gave me the travel adventure bug. So London was another amazing experience. That was more of a study abroad internship, sort of putting on my own radio. It was like they called it web radio at the time. Really, it was a weekly podcast that we got to do, which was, again, when you're in college, you want to figure out how to do it all. You want to learn how to do the audio, the photography. You don't just want to be the guy who thinks he can sit behind a desk. You got to be Jon Evans to do that. You got to build up the credibility to do that right away. So just learning everything was really important to me, and the fact that I got to do it in so many different cool places only added on to that willingness to kind of branch out and figure out exactly what I wanted to do with this.
Well, you got the job at the Gray DC Bureau, and let's face it, some of the best reporters in the country are the ones who are walking that beat in Washington, D.C. every night, every day, every weekend. Who are some of those that you revered, that you studied? Not necessarily that you wanted to be like, but you saw what they did and you're like, I like the way they do that. Maybe I might incorporate a little bit of that into Peter Zampa.
Yeah, it's probably going to be recency bias. I'm sure I had more answers for you back when I was actually in DC, but you see some of these ladies and gentlemen out there who are just really willing to stick their nose in no matter what the situation is. And people like Manu Raju or like Jonathan Carl, some of these other folks who are the ABC lady who's now, I think, at the White House, if I'm not mistaken, but I think her name is Rachel Scott. These are the people who are just busting their butt to make sure that they get that information. And a lot of it is relationship building. And that is something that I always wanted to get better at, just because these people seem to have this relationship with these lawmakers where it's like, hey, we need each other. Let's keep going. We can butt heads. But at the end of the day, we both have a duty to our constituents. So let's figure out a way to get this. Some of those people are really just putting in the long hours. And that's really not just the TV people. Some of these print people or these, people who work for Politico or Punchbowl News, they're the ones who are really putting in the long hours, just sitting down, because we always got to be on TV at some point. So we get a little reprieve from just sitting outside the speaker's office. But for some of these guys, man, they are just there nonstop. It is their life. Whether you like it or not, they obviously don't have a choice because they are now fully addicted, as I kind of alluded to earlier. It is their life. For some people, it's not what they want, but on Capitol Hill and at the White House, it really has to be what you want.
I tell people the business has changed dramatically since I've been at it now 40, almost 50 years in broadcasting. But how we do what we do hasn't changed. What do you think about the changes in this business in just the 11 or 12 years since you've been out of college?
Yeah, well, as I said, the ability to shoot with your phone is fascinating. That seems to be the way things are moving. The social media aspect, the fact that you have to do it, that was not always something that I loved doing. Sometimes cringe looking at things that you see out there, but it's part of the ball game now. It is. Some people would say it is the ball game because our industry is evolving, and there are going to be things that just look a lot different. The use of AI, of course, we have to fit AI into every podcast we're on now.
Yeah.
But it just, that stuff, I mean, the technology that we're talking about now just was unfathomable when I started back in 2015, really. And now everything has changed, literally.
Your bio mentions that you love tuning into a daytime baseball game to kind of unwind a little bit. As I was doing research for our talk today, I found a video, I guess just after you started with the Gray DC Bureau, where you said you were an Oakland A's fan. Is that still the truth, or did you kind of make it over to the national side of things since you were in DC for so long?
No, yeah, I'm a little upset that you're bringing this up right now, John, but all right, we can do this. First of all, that bio is outdated. I do not like tuning into baseball games anymore, as you can imagine, because it's a part of your childhood that's really been, and I can get as serious as you want about this, but when you grow up doing things like that mean the world to you, and then you see rich people or leaders kind of blow it all up in your face, no matter how old you are, that hurts. If you want to get philosophical about it, that's kind of why we do what we do, because these things have impacts on people. Yes, it's just a game, it's a sport, but it's also a community that was really torn apart. And it's my community that was torn apart because my group of friends were going to these games when we were young. We were there for the 20-game streak that Moneyball is all about. All these things are so formative, and to have it ripped away. I know I'm making this really depressing all of a sudden, but you poked a bear that you didn't want to poke there, John, because this meant a lot to me, and I'm still in denial until they move to Vegas officially.
Yeah, well, I'm a Phillies fan. So I grew up outside. I grew up a couple of hours outside of Philadelphia. So I just wish we could get ourselves a bullpen because we have all the offense we need, but our bullpen is like a dumpster fire on a nightly basis. And anyway, I know, just like you and I, we both have our sore points when it comes to Major League Baseball.
That's right.
What does Peter Zampa want to do? Do you like this job enough, the senior national correspondent job enough to stay in it for 10, 15 years? Or where do you see Peter Zampa in 10 years or so?
It's a great question because I love this job. And I was, as part of my 2:30 a.m. wake up today, I was thinking about, man, I've almost hit every single state where we have a station. How lucky am I to be doing this? And there are still so many, there will never be a shortage of stories. It feels like, obviously when I started, we had the end of the Obama years, but then when President Trump and Hillary Clinton faced off, everything seemed to change as far as interest in politics and bringing these issues home to people to understand and really figure out what all of this means for them beyond all the vitriol. So yeah, these stories are they're why we do it. So I would love to keep telling these stories for as long as I can. 10, 15 years, my goodness, that's a long ways out. I just had a little baby girl, so who knows where I will be, but it's a long ways out.
Well, congratulations on joining the fatherhood group with the rest of us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the ride.
When you go to a story or when you're out reporting a story, do you get the fake news cries? Do you get the media's no good cries?
It is a good question because some of these people have personally been betrayed. So they might actually have a reason to not like the media beyond just, doing what they're told by the worst parts of the internet. It's not as much, but sometimes you have to be quick to explain exactly who you are, that you don't have an agenda, that you do want to just tell their story. And a lot of these people will look me up beforehand, so they'll kind of know, hey, I don't know if it's going to be a good story, but he's going to give me a fair shot here based on what I've seen. And that's all we can ask. Some people just really are camera shy. They don't want to be a part of this, again, beyond the fake news side of things. But yeah, others really do believe what they hear, and they just kind of loop us all in. If you have an ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox tag next to you, someone might feel some way about that, even though we couldn't be more disconnected from whoever they are actually talking about. We are our own people, and even people within those entities that seem to be so polarizing right now don't deserve those monikers either. Obviously, we know that most of them are really people who are trying to do the right thing and tell these stories. So yeah, of course, it's unfair. Luckily, we don't see it as much. But that's also another thing is that as just this kind of large correspondent role who feeds all these different stations, people on the ground don't actually know my face as well as they might know a Jon Evans, because I'm not necessarily in their living room every night. So our situation is a little different, and I don't have to wear a suit and tie when I'm out there, so that also helps. They trust me a little more.
Yeah, and believe me, I'm envious of that too, not having to wear the shirt, tie, and jacket every night when you go out on many of these things. Peter Zampa is the senior national correspondent for Gray Media, reporting from more than 100 stations all across the country. You can see him on WECT News covering the biggest stories in the news cycle. Peter, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know you're slam busy. You're up at 2:30 in the morning thinking about your stories and sending them down to us every day. Thanks for taking the time to be on the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast. I really have enjoyed talking media with somebody who's front and center on the lines with us every day.
Oh, John, this has been fantastic. I'll come back anytime.
A big thank you to Peter Zampa for taking time from his busy schedule to join us for this week's podcast interview. You can watch his stories from all across America on a nightly basis on WECT News. If you can, please follow or subscribe to our podcast, One-on-One with Jon Evans, on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. And please leave us a comment or a suggestion. We really do care what you think about our interviews. And share the podcast with a friend. We hope they like it too. If you want to see a video version of this interview, just head on over to my YouTube channel. It's Jon Evans TV. I'm Jon Evans. We really appreciate you joining us for this week's episode of One-on-One.